So it's not really enough just to be an inventor. And I was lucky enough to read an autobiography of Tesla when I was young. And these are the kinds of things he would do. This isn't actually Tesla. But he would, he regularly have sparks coming out of his head and so on. And he is one of the greatest inventors of all time, but he had trouble funding his research even to invent things. And so being able to fund things and really get them out into the world is a really important thing too, if you want to change the world. So I want to just give you a couple of examples about how I think about these things. But these are basically numbers that are basic truths about the world. And I found when I ask some people I think are great inventors these kinds of things, they can rattle them off the top of their head. And I think that's a big part of how they're able to innovate and think about the world. So I'll give you some examples. So there's a big hype recently about having terminals, network appliances that you'd put in your kitchen and used to access the internet. And there's a bunch of companies started to do this, and there's probably billions of dollars spent on it. And in fact, they didn't work for this single reason, I think, which is that the minimum cost of an LCD display is pretty high. It's about $300. And in fact, even regular monitors are pretty expensive, and if you buy cheap ones, they don't necessarily work. They smell bad, and they might burn out quickly, and they're big physically, and they actually take a lot of power, and all these kinds of things. So displays are a huge, huge issue for almost all consumer electronics devices. And it's hard to make a small network appliance used to access the internet when the display will cost more than people are willing to pay, right? Or a very significant cost. So it's really important to know these things. Just wanted to give a couple other examples for the computer science type people in the audience. So at Google, we use a lot of computers, and we think about computer costs a lot. And we have over 10,000 computers, in fact. And we notice things like, well, why don't our servers have 20 gigabytes of memory? And in fact, you could build a $4,000 server, roughly, that had 20 gigabytes of main memory, which is big as many hard drives, right? Instead of having, say, an expensive RAID array or something like that. And most programmers would agree that would be a lot more useful than having, a slightly more reliable disk system. This doesn't exist commercially, and it'd probably be a good product. It doesn't exist because the way motherboards are made and all these kinds of things. But if you start looking at these numbers, you say, how much does memory really cost? You start thinking about, what things is it possible to build? And you also notice from this, tape is almost as expensive as disk. And that doesn't even count the cost of the tape drives and all that stuff. So do you think tape is a great way to do things? It's really not. You probably shouldn't be, probably nobody should be using tape for anything. Now, how long will the industry take to figure that out? A long time, right? So it's really useful to compute these kinds of numbers. The other thing I tell you is that most software, as it's been designed, has been designed to operate on disk because memory was very, very expensive. The memory has gotten tremendously cheaper in the past couple of years, much faster than disk or CPU or any other things. And in fact, most things you'd want to do actually fit in memory. And you see actually the last number I have there is that memory is 200,000 times faster than disk for random access. And if you're sort of engineering a system and you're thinking about, how much effort do I have to put into building indexes, or how much effort do I have to put into being clever so I don't access very much data, a factor of 200,000 is a huge difference, right? But in fact, most systems don't use that. So anyway, I don't want to dwell on this. I have lots of numbers. Looking at batteries, I just wanted to point out, like your cell phone, like the battery in a StarTAC like this, the battery itself is $25 worth of materials, right? And it actually only lasts about a year. And so you think about, making cheap cell phones, that's probably a big issue. Just battery technology is also a huge limitation in devices. So I know it's a little bit depressing, but I like to think about what's wrong with the world. Because again, that's where you get innovation. And I want to just give you some quick examples of things I think are sort of instructive in this way. One is home automation. People really think it'd be great, if you had home automation. And you ask people what it means, and they say, oh, well, I want my bathtub to fill up, or all these kinds of things. I think the main things you'd want would be lighting and heating, which are actually sort of okay already. And in fact, you might want your front door to open remotely like your car trunk does, right? But how many houses have that as a feature? And that's not even really part of home automation, remote entry to your house, which almost all cars have now, right? So I think, the reason you can argue, that's probably a good thing, but the reasons why that probably doesn't happen is there's no standardization in houses. Every house is different, whereas there's only a small number of potential cars, so a lot more energy goes into the design. And so just think about these things in your life. How many really fancy houses have you seen where, the water leaks out of the tub and, mildew's in the wrong place and you slip when you get out and so on? Again, because no one's ever tested the bathroom, right? It's probably a unique bathroom. So I think houses would probably benefit a lot from standardization.